Now let's get into security a little bit and talk about security group. So while creating the EC2 instance, in the network option, we had mentioned something called security group, and I asked you to just put allow all and then 0000. But now let's go ahead and try to understand what security group entails in VPC. First of all, security group is firewall for EC2 instances. So using security group, you can allow traffic which are coming into EC2 instance using inbound rule. So you can allow only a certain IP address or certain network address. You can also allow outgoing traffic from EC2 instances using outbound rule. Security group is rule based. Now what happens is that there are various options. The first option is type. Now in the type, we mention the type of traffic. For example, TCP, SSH, DNS, HTTP, databases, etc. Then you have port, wherein we mention on which port the traffic is allowed, either incoming or outgoing. Then, if it is an inbound rule, that means we are allowing incoming traffic into EC2 instance, we mention from where the traffic should come from, which is the source. And if it is an outgoing traffic, we mention the destination to where the traffic would go to using outbound rules. So let me show you security groups. So in the VPC console, just scroll down and here we have network ACLs and security groups. Click on security groups and then we can create security groups. So just click on security group. So there are multiple options. In a security group, we mention the name, the description, and the VPC where we'll use this security group in. Mentioning VPC does not mean that the security group would be associated with the VPC. We are saying that this security group will be used in this particular VPC. Then we allow the inbound rule and the outbound rule. So if I click on add rule, you see we have type. Now in type, we can mention custom TCP, custom UDP, all TCP, all UDP, SSH, etc. So we are trying to mention what kind of traffic or what type of traffic we are trying to allow or we are planning to allow. So these are all the type of network traffic. Then we mention the port range. So basically the port on which the network traffic is allowed. For example, if it is SSH, the port would be 22. If it is MySQL, the port would be 3306. If it is Postgres, the port would be 5439. Similarly, in Redshift also we have port. And then we mention the source. It can be anywhere, meaning that the traffic can come from any place in the internet. If we mention anywhere, it will add 0000, or you can select custom and mention the IP address or the network address. Now I can also select my IP, which will add my IP address here. So if you see, my IP address ends with /32. This is how IP address is denoted. Same is the case with outbound rules. So we mentioned the type of network traffic do you want to allow going out of the EC2 instance, and then we mentioned the protocol, the port range, and the destination. So to which IP address or network address we are planning to allow the outbound traffic. So this is how we create security group and we add inbound and outbound rules. So we have seen the security group, how we create security group. Let's do some hands-on. So we'll create security group for the following architecture. So this is the architecture. We have 3IAM public subnet 1A. So there would be one EC2 instance in 3IAM public subnet 1A. There's one EC2 instance in the 3IAM public subnet, 3IAM private subnet 1C, and there will be one more EC2 instance in 3IAM private subnet 1D. So what we'll be doing, we'll be allowing SSH from the EC2 instance in public subnet 1A to EC2 instance in private subnet 1B. And also we'll allow SSH to EC2 instance in private subnet 1D from this particular EC2 instance, but we will not allow SSH from the public EC2 instance in the public subnet to the EC2 instance in private subnet 1D. So let us go ahead and do that. So currently I have three EC2 instances, 3IAM EC2 public 1A, private 1C, and private 1D. and I have attached the same security group in all the EC2 instance. Just to see how do you see the security group, click on the EC2 instance, go to security, and here it will show us the security group, so which is launch wizard 4. Same is the case with public subnet 1A also. We are using launch wizard 4, or EC2 instance private 1D launch wizard 4. So if you go to security groups and check launch wizard 4 here, so this is the security group, and if I click on this, in the inbound rule I am allowing SSH from all the devices, and in the outbound rule also I'm allowing all traffic to all the devices out there, basically to internet. So we'll not do that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create 3 security groups for the 3 EC2 instances. So first let me create the security group for the public subnet. So this is the EC2 instance. I'm creating a security group for this EC2 instance. So what I have to do, I'll have to allow SSH from all the devices outside, meaning allow SSH from internet in the inbound rule, and in the outbound rule I'll have to allow SSH only to either this EC2 instance or this particular subnet or this particular network address, which is 17.11.100/24. So the name of the security group is security group public 1A, and we'll select the VPC to be 3 IAM VPC. I'll add an inbound rule. In the type, I'll mention that the security group, or I'm allowing SSH from anywhere. So I'm allowing SSH from internet. So I put the description here also. But in the outbound rule, I'm not going to allow everything to internet. So I'll allow SSH only to this particular subnet, which is 17.11.100.0/24. So I'm allowing SSH to private subnet 1D, and let me tag it. I'll mention a name as the security group public 1A. So I'll create the security group. Again, I'll not attach it to the EC2 instance. We'll do that at the end. So this first security group has been created, and if I click on this, so it'll show me the inbound rule. So this is the inbound rule allowing SSH from internet, and in the outbound rule I'm allowing SSH only to 17.11.100.0/24. So this one is done, and the next one what I'm going to do is that I'll be allowing SSH from this public subnet in the inbound rule, and I'll allow SSH to this private subnet in the outbound rule for this particular EC2 instance. So click on create security group, and the name would be security group private 1C. Allow SSH from public subnet 1A in 3 IAM VPC. Now in the inbound rule, let me add a rule. Again, I'll have to allow only SSH, and the source would be, of course, the network address of the public subnet, which is 17.11.0/24, and I'm allowing SSH from public subnet 1A. In the outbound rule also, I'll allow SSH only to private subnet 1D. So allow SSH to private subnet 1D and give it a name. Make sure to tag it with the key name, otherwise it will not be shown in the name column. So the second one is also done. So let me go ahead and create the last one. So in the last one, I'll be allowing SSH only from this private subnet, and I'll not add any other rule. So if I do not add any other rule, that means I'm not allowing the traffic. So if I do not add a rule for public subnet 1A, that means I'm not allowing SSH or any traffic to come from public subnet 1A. So create security group. It would be private 1D, and I'm allowing SSH from private subnet 1A. Select the VPC. In the inbound traffic or in the inbound rule, allow SSH, and it should be from 17.11.100.0/24. Sorry, I mentioned it in the outbound rule. Let me add it in the inbound rule, and I'll delete the outbound rule. So there is no outbound rule in this particular security group. Let me add a tag and then click on create security group. So all the three security groups are done. So I have created security group for the EC2 instance in public subnet 1A, private subnet 1C, and private subnet 1D. Let's just look at the inbound and outbound rules for this security group or security group 1A. In the inbound rule, I have allowed SSH from internet, and in the outbound, I have allowed SSH to private subnet 1C. So in the security group private subnet 1C, I have allowed SSH from the public subnet, which is 17.11.1024, and in the outbound rule I have allowed SSH to private subnet 1D, which is 17.11.200. Finally, in the security group private subnet 1D or security group private 1D, I have allowed SSH from 17.11.100, which is private subnet 1C, and there is no outbound rule because that is not needed. So now I'll have to attach this security group with the EC2 instances. So these are the three EC2 instances. This is the first one, public EC2 public 1A. Click on actions and then click on security, and here change security groups. I'll remove the launch wizard 4 and I will add security group public 1A. Click on save. So this is the EC2 instance. If I look at security now, so I have associated the other security group, which is security group public 1A. Let me go ahead and change the same for private 1C first. I have added security group private 1C and I'll remove launch wizard 4. Click on save. So if I click on the EC2 instance now, go to security, and in the security group I should see security group private 1C. Finally, let's change the same for the third EC2 instance. So in the third EC2 instance also, if I go to security, we have changed the security group to security group private 1D. So now let me try to SSH into the first EC2 instance, which is in public subnet, and this is the IP address. Okay, I am inside of that EC2 instance, which is in public subnet, sorry. And let me try to SSH into both the EC2 instances, which are in private subnet 1C and private subnet 1D. I should be allowed to SSH into the EC2 instance, which is in private subnet 1C, but not in the one which is in private subnet 1D. And this is the IP address 17.11.187. So as you can see, I'm allowed to SSH here. Press Ctrl D, it will take you to the previous EC2 instance. And now I will try to SSH into the EC2 instance, which is in private subnet 1D. And this is the private IP address. And I should not be allowed to do so. As you can see, by now, the other EC2 instance should have allowed me, but it is not allowing me. So which is pretty normal. So this use case is done from this EC2 instance. I can SSH into this EC2 instance, but not this one. So the last one that I have to raise, from this EC2 instance, I should be allowed to SSH into this EC2 instance. And I'll have to copy the private key to this EC2 instance, by the way. So let me copy the PEM file to the private EC2 instance. So it is done. And now let me log into the private EC2 instance, which is in 1C, by the way. And I should be able to see the PEM file. So it has been copied. So what I have done, I have copied the PEM file from this EC2 instance to this EC2 instance, because I'll have to SSH from EC2 instance 1C to EC2 instance 1D. And I should be allowed to SSH into it, which I am. So this entire architecture is complete. By now you have got an idea how security group works and how it helps in providing security to individual EC2 instances. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention is that you can associate a single security group to multiple EC2 instances also, or you can associate multiple security groups to a single instance as well. So if you have different rules in different security groups and you want to apply all those rules on a set of EC2 instances, you can actually associate all the security groups to all the EC2 instances or a single EC2 instance. And the other way around is also true, wherein same security group it is associated with multiple EC2 instances.